Hello, everybody. Welcome to a new thing that I'm going to be doing for a little bit here on the channel that I like to call Cartoon Conference. I've been watching some cartoons lately, like some mature, some childish, yada, yada, yada. And I've been thinking to myself, wow, I actually really enjoy cartoons. I don't care how old I'm going to get, I just really enjoy them. And I feel like I really kind of want to just sit down and talk about them, especially because there's some that just kind of like really hit hard. Like, wow, these are really amazing. They're not just doing it for the laughs, they actually have a lot going on. So, first one that I want to start off with, definitely very dear in my heart, is Adventure Time. Adventure Time is one of the few shows that I know that I started watching as a child, and I watched all the way going into adulthood. It's not like, oh, it started as a child, it finished as a child, and it's like, or I started watching it as a child, but I kind of phased out of it. Like, oh, I don't really mess with this anymore. It's like, no, I started watching it when it first came on. I was basically about, actually, it was probably like 10 or something. I don't know. But like, I watched it all the way until the very end, and I definitely enjoyed it the whole time. It was a very good show. I remember just how much I enjoyed it when it first showed up. Like, even, it was probably within its first couple seasons. I remember as a kid, I wrote down like a little book. Like I took some pieces of paper and made it into like a little book where I wrote down like all of my favorite quotes from it. And I remember one time I saw online like a replica of Finn's hat, and I was thinking, yo, I actually really want that. Obviously, I might not be down with that now, but I remember I wanted it. And like I just had so many good memories. First of all, like the fact that there was a character in it named Jake. I thought that was pretty cool. I mean, I go by Jacob, but some people call me Jake, so that felt like it was pretty fun. And then I remember back when it first came out, I was immediately talking with my friends. Like I remember one of the very first episodes. It was Trouble in Lumpy Space, where like one of my friends was telling me that he actually quoted that episode to someone. He went up to some kid. He's like, "Stop talking to yourself, dumb guy, and I'll take your ball and get out of here." And I remember thinking, wow, that is amazing that he actually used that line. That was hilarious. And then I remember it was like sixth grade at the lunch table. My friends and I did this thing that we like to call the nominees, where it was me and one of my friends. Like we would take turns. We would pick a TV show, and we would list off four characters from it, and then like we would go around the table and like we would all take a vote. And I know that so many times we would do Adventure Time because even so early on they had so many characters that you could choose from. And I just love how the show evolves as it goes along. And for one thing, I would like to say this isn't a review or anything. Like if it were gonna be a review, I probably should have done it almost like a year ago. But this is basically just gonna be me talking about a show, just talking about my memories of it, my opinions of it, what I like, maybe what I did like. I mean, I don't really like talk about what I dislike all that much. I try to be positive when I think about things, but still, I mean, I guess it's fair to not gas something up beyond all hope. But I remember, I think it was like the end of season two, whenever they first fought the Lich, and then at the very end, whenever Princess Bubblegum had to go through surgery because of what happened, and then they're like, oh, she's 13. I remember feeling like so good because I'm thinking, wow, this is so good for Finn. Like, he's had such a huge crush on Princess Bubblegum, and now he finally gets to be with her. But then I also remember thinking to myself, I'm like, wait, is she just gonna be 13 forever? Like, is she just gonna be like this? Do they really just like change her character to be 13? And then later on, we find out like, oh, PB's actually like hundreds of years old. So it's like it doesn't even matter. So like no matter what, Finn is way too young for her. And then I remember whenever the commercials were first coming on, and then you would see like Marceline, and I'm thinking, is she ever gonna come into play? And then they had the first episode where she was basically just a villain, and then it turns out the whole time she was just messing with them. And I was thinking, oh wow, Marceline's a really cool character. But then for a while, I thought, wait, are they not gonna bring her back? Was she just gonna be a one-off character? Because I thought it was weird that she was in the opening theme. And then they brought her back again, but back then I was a kid, so I didn't pay attention to this stuff enough. So I was thinking, wait, is she just gonna be like a very minor character? Then little did we know that she actually became a lot more prominent of a character. And I just love the fact that they go into so many backstories. Like at first with Marceline, it's like, oh yeah, she was just this vampire who liked to go around and have fun, but then they reveal that she actually has a long history with Ice King, aka Simon, and then you see what it's kind of like for her to have her relationship with her father and how it's like she wants to love him, but she is just kind of embarrassed. And then the whole idea of how she became the vampire queen, just the fact that they take this character who on the surface just seems like she always wants to have fun, but then give her so many layers as well. I could really respect that. And then I mentioned Ice King, him as well. Like pretty much the subplot of Adventure Time is almost like Ice King's redemption arc. Like he comes out as being a villain where all he wants to do is capture princesses, and then eventually it's like, okay, he's still kind of pathetic, he's still kind of crazy, but he becomes less of a bad guy. And then over time he starts to become more of an ally because even though he doesn't remember his life as Simon, like just Marceline kind of starting to pay attention and care to him starts to kind of make him more redeemable. Like he kind of moves on from all that. Like yeah, he still is kind of weird, wants to be with ladies, but he doesn't kidnap them anymore. And then just the random moments whenever you would see like callbacks to Simon or like he would turn back into Simon, you're just like, oh wow, like just came out of nowhere just to see like the complete opposite side of the coin. Oh, first of all, I need to take a drink. I'm getting thirsty for just talking so long. Ah, that's good. And then who else was there? I guess Finn and Jake's relationship in general. Like before, it's just oh yeah, a 12-year-old boy and his dog just going on adventures. But then it kind of becomes so much more than that. Like you see how much they really kind of have to help each other out. Like Jake really acting like the big brother, but then it's like whenever Jake's going through something, how Finn is still there for him as well. Like even though they're not biological brothers, because obviously Finn is a human, but then it turns out Jake, he's not even like near the very end of the show. It's like oh wow, Jake's not even like biologically just from his parents. Like it turns out he's also part alien, which then explains why he has his stretchy powers. Like just the whole idea of how much it changed where it's like oh one episode he's like oh I was maybe just born with my powers or I got them from like a mud puddle, and then it's like oh it turns out that his biological dad is actually an alien from some far off planet and that's why he has his powers. But then how I love whenever like Jake kind of turned on his space dad because he's like no you weren't there for me, like dads are supposed to be there for their kids, so you're not really my dad, Joshua is my dad. And I guess that's another thing. Like, I also really like the moments whenever you briefly see their parents because by the time the show starts, their parents are already dead. So then just random moments whenever you see like flashbacks of them parents, or the episode I actually just watched this. I think last night it was Dad's Dungeon. Whenever they went on the quest to get their family sword, and then it's like the whole time Joshua is just kind of like making fun of Finn, but then he reveals later like oh yeah I made this dungeon for you because I wanted to make sure that you're tough in the world so you're ready for anything, and then how he's like I love you son. And then I guess speaking on that idea of parenting, how whenever Jake became a parent himself you kind of see yeah he's still laid back, like he still goofs around a lot, he's still a slacker, but he still kind of takes that responsibility to care for his kids, and like they still care about him. Like even his son Kim Kil-won, he tried to force his dad to grow up, but eventually he's like, you know what? He's still a good person. He might be a slacker, he might goof around, but I know that he's a good person, so I don't care anymore. Who else is there in the show? Gee whiz. I don't know. I guess just I know we've already talked about him some, but then Finn, how it's like, oh yeah, he's just some 12-year-old kid who just likes to go on adventures for the sake of fun, really. But then over time, you really kind of see him become a true hero. Like he took on the witch, and then he took on other. I mean, then he literally went through a multiverse to fight the witch, and then he took on Orgolorg, and shit, who else was there? I know there were other villains. Wow, I'm gassing up this show. I can't even remember some of the villains. Yeah, this is awkward. I can't remember who were some of the other villains. I mean, I guess all the way in the finale, whenever I mean, I guess in the finale though, that's the kind of that's something that I think is really interesting, and that he even brings up. He's like, oh, several years ago, I would have just been like, oh yeah, let's go fight. But then you see how determined he is to try to come to a peaceful resolution. And one thing I also liked about Finn that I was thinking about earlier is the foreshadowing that they've done with him. How in so many different places they show that if Finn was eventually going to lose his arm, like future versions, like whenever they would show possible future versions of Finn, he always had his arm missing. Like when he was in the pillow world and it showed him in the future, he had a pillow arm to replace his original. And then when he was on the dungeon train, it showed him in the future, he had a new arm. And then in the farm world version, he already had a mechanical arm. So I just love that foreshadowing that Finn is eventually going to lose his arm, which he did twice. So was it he lost it the first time because of his dad? Yeah, because of his dad, and then it grew back, and then he lost it the second time fighting Susan. Yeah, because that's when the grass sword reacted, and then it pulled itself off. And then Finn just eventually accepted it. And then if now he lost his arm a third time because then he just accepted it. He never got a mechanical arm, which I thought was kind of interesting how he decided to go that route. Be like, you know what, screw it, I'm not getting an arm. But another thing though, talking about the second time he lost his arm, that's one thing I thought was really interesting when they brought in Fern, because it all started off with like actually the whole thing about Fern, the fact that they built it up for so long, because first of all, he just had the grass sword, where it's like all it was really that you saw was that it was cursed and it just stayed on his arm. But then he's like, okay, I can get down with this, because he realized that he could retract it. So he's like, this works. But then like he knew that the grass sword was cursed, but he didn't know to what extent. And then eventually, he didn't have the grass sword, but it was like still part of him, but it didn't actually work. And then they had to try to bring back Prismo, where Finn interacted with his past self, and that created Finn's sword. So it's like it's basically, but then Finn's sword still has like the original Finn's mind and soul, all that stuff within it. And then how he had that for a while, and then eventually the two of them kind of built up, where it's like it combined together, where it's like bam, and then that created Fern. And then I just feel kind of bad though for Fern, because it's like to him he really was Finn, because part of him was the Finn from Finn's sword, which really was, like I said, Finn. But then now he has like physical form, and he has all Finn's memories. He has basically Finn's body. But then they're like, no, you're not Finn, which like I get it, yeah, like he's not the blood definitive version of Finn, but in a way he really was. So it's like so I can really kind of understand his identity crisis, because it's like to him he was Finn, but everyone's saying no, you're not. It's like they kind of treat him sometimes like it, but they kind of force him to be like, no, you're not. So he's thinking, well, who am I? What is my individual purpose? And then how you see Fern really start to try to grow on his own, but then he's like, no, I can't do this. I'm always going to be in his shadow. So that's when you see him kind of lose it, and he kind of turns to the darkness to be like, the only way that I can be myself is to be the only Finn. And then I remember whenever I watched the episode Three Buckets, and then he turned on Finn, I just felt so bad, because it's like you can tell that like he doesn't quite want to do it to Finn, but you can tell that like he's just that desperate for his own identity. And then whenever you see them fighting, I feel so bad, because it's like Finn trying to be peaceful, saying like, look, we don't have to do this, we can just go home. And then Fern's kind of like, no, it's too late now, like I'm tired of living in your shadow. And then how Finn just accidentally killed him. I remember I saw that, I was genuinely shocked. I was like, oh my god, because they build it up so much. And then just Finn comes back and he's just speechless. And then like Jake could immediately tell that something bad had happened. And then whenever they revealed Uncle Gumbald at the very end, I was thinking like, wait, who is that? You see him picking up Fern, so I'm like, okay, so Fern's gonna come back, but what's this guy doing with him? Like, what does this guy want with Fern? So I was like really curious what was going on, because I'm pretty sure at that point I knew that the next season was gonna be the final one. So I'm thinking, wow, they're really gonna do a lot. And then I guess that's also another good segue, is talking about Uncle Gumbald, because after that I realized whenever I'd go back and watch some Adventure Time, I'd be thinking, whoa, they actually mentioned her Uncle Gumbald before, but like in very subtle ways. Like it went all the way back to Susan Strong when they were out in that forest. Like she was saying, yeah, these were planted by my uncle Gumbald. And then later on, we see him doing that. And then she mentioned him a couple other times later, just very casually mentioning her family. And then, like, you realize later on in that final season, they really kind of show that stuff. So it's like, wow, they actually had this stuff planned out for a while. And then what is it? There was the episode where they invaded or infiltrated the banana guards. And then the one guard was saying, like, oh, PB is a tyrannical ruler who will try to subdue anyone that goes against her. And then one of the people that they showed was her Uncle Gumbald. It's like, wow, that's actually kind of what happened. Like the fact that they were saying, like, oh, she turned her uncle into some candy person. It's like, that's actually kind of what happened. It was just sort of on accident. So it's like the fact that they foreshadowed all this so much, just like, wow, they really did build up all this stuff. It was actually pretty wild. And then whenever they reveal how Uncle Gumbald, Aunt Lolly, and cousin Chikwe returned was because of LSP. Because when LSP used her anti-elemental powers, it turned everyone back to normal. But that included uh, those three. Like, they were turned into candy people, but then they were turned back to normal. And I was like, oh wow. Like, I was kind of shocked because it's not even like LSP did that on purpose. That was just complete accident. And then how, like, Chikwe, he was just an asshole. Like, he was, I mean, like, that guy was funny though. Like, he had some good burns, but then, like, Aunt Lolly, she seemed kind of underhanded, but then Uncle Gumbald, he was just downright evil. And then, like, how in the finale, like, PB was able to make peace with her aunt at least. Like, Gumbald was going to betray her, but then her aunt was like, you know what? He wasn't going to change, but I'm willing to. So then you see them make peace. So I remember feeling so good for PB that she finally has, like, more family again. Like, she's kind of able to move on from all that. And then, of course, Chikwe just gets turned back into Crunchy. Because, come on, it's Crunchy. Like, you gotta have Crunchy. Like, that was, like, Crunchy actually had some random moments. Because, like, Crunchy, like, even though he's not actually, like, Chikwe in control of it, like, Crunchy was actually kind of power hungry when you think about it. Like, there was the episode, The Pajama War, when Finn and Princess Bubblegum snuck away. And then they're like, oh, they're dead. So they're like, oh yeah, we're gonna try to get a new leader. And then Crunchy just like hid away, and then out of nowhere he just usurped everyone and tried to take control. And then there was whenever King of Ooh was in charge, and then Crunchy just like kind of lashed out, and then like Crunchy took over. Well, it's like everyone turned on King of Ooh. Then Crunchy's like, I'm taking over now. It's like, wow, Crunchy really is kind of power hungry. And I guess another person that made me think of was Peppermint Butler. Like, he just kind of starts off like some humble guy, like just there doing his stuff, and it's like we just see how much he really kind of interacts with the dark arts. I think the first time we really kind of see it is whenever he tells Finn and Jake how to get to the underworld, where it's like, oh wow, he knows death, he knows about all this stuff. And then you really see it in the episode Nemesis when he goes up against Peacemaster. He's like, nah, I'm taking care of this guy myself. This guy's out here, I am challenging him. Like, that moment, like, that shit was funny. And then he's like, oh, I'm just gonna turn your kids into demons. He's like, oh, you want 3 demon babies? And he's like, fine, fine, I stop. Yo, shouts to that episode for the fact that Rainn Wilson was in there. Like, I go back and watch it, I'm like, yo, it's just so funny just watching it and just hearing Dwight. Like, that moment was funny. And then, like, yeah, I just remember, like, near the finale, like, Peppermint Butler actually just got turned into a baby. I mean, I guess he'd eventually grow back into it. I mean, you even see him reading a book about the dark arts, but still. But, yeah, as you can tell, I just really like Adventure Time. It was just something that was very meaningful to me because they have some very silly moments, which I feel like is very good because it's such lighthearted stuff. But then they also have like such serious moments where it's like, oh wow, this really gets you. Like the whole idea of what it was like for Finn to encounter his dad, where it's like, Finn, your father is alive. And then whenever he got to go meet his mom, oops, sorry about that. And then, like talked about with Marceline, whenever she was starting to think about Simon again, like how much it really meant for her to see Simon because she really wanted to be with him again. And then Princess Bubblegum, all of her backstory where it's like, yeah, like she's been through a lot of terrible stuff, but she's trying to definitely be like a good person. And then Ice King, like I said, how he kind of went through his whole redemption of being a villain to just kind of being weird to like actually being more of an ally. And then how in the end they finally had Ice King turn back into Simon. And I remember for a while I was thinking, I wonder how they're gonna handle that finale, because I'm thinking I could picture them wanting to turn him back into Simon. That way Simon can kind of have that happy ending. But I'm thinking, well, I feel like though that'd be kind of weird because they built up Ice King as sort of his own character. Like I know that he's technically Simon in sort of an insane state, but at the same time though, they really did kind of build up Ice King to be his own character. Like you really kind of see him go through his own sort of redemption. So I was thinking, I wonder how they're gonna handle that. And in a way, they really kind of did it with the best of both worlds. Like Ice King became Simon again, but then Gunter wished to basically just turn into Ice King. So it's like it all works out. Like we have Simon, but now we also have basically a new version of Ice King. So I was definitely pretty pleased about that. And Betty, definitely worth mentioning Betty. The whole idea of how Simon missed Betty and like so much of what he wanted to do was just for Betty. Where it's like whenever he temporarily came back, he had the whole plan just to be able to try to explain to Betty what happened and say goodbye. And then we find out that the reason that the Ice King is so obsessed with capturing princesses is because he thought of Betty as his princess. So that was kind of like the lingering thought. And that's why he's so lonely, because he doesn't have Betty. And then Betty, she came to the future, and then she goes crazy because she wants to get Simon back. And whenever she betrayed Finn, I was like, oh no, this is bad. And then they even show like Prismo and the Cosmic Owl watching. They have this look on their face like, oh shit. She's like trying to undo everything that's happened. This is bad. And then eventually, like, Ice King's just like, look, I know that you're into the Simon guy, but I'm Ice King, and I feel like I deserve respect. Because she was like, I'm just basically going to erase you, make sure that you never happen. I'm like, dude, that's not fair. Like, come on. Ice King is still a nice guy. Man, they just do so many good things in that show. I don't even know if I have, like, a proper top 10 list, or at least, like, a top 5. I know that one thing that I definitely like, one episode that I always think about so often is the episode What Was Missing, because I feel like that's really kind of what set in that core group of friends, really. Because it's like, it's the first time that all 5 of those characters were really together and interacted all together like this in a more friendly way. Plus, it was like the first time that you see Marceline and Princess Bubblegum start to put aside their differences and decide to try to become friends again. It's like at first they're all kind of fighting, they can't really find a way to get along. But then I just love the song that Finn sings at the end. Like I get that song stuck in my head so many times. Just the and the fact that again it just solidified all their friendship. Where you have Finn, Jake, Princess Bubblegum, Marceline, and Bimo. Like all of them are part of that core group of friends that you really see throughout the show. Like they all kind of hang out together and do stuff together, and I really love seeing that. Especially because like Finn saying like, "Am I sort of your joke, your knight, or your brother? Do you look down on me because I'm younger?" Where I can really kind of feel that for Finn, where it's like, you have Marceline who's like 1,000-year-old vampire, you have Princess Bubblegum who's centuries and centuries old, and then you have Jake where it's like, I think they said he's basically 28 in dog years, but he's still mentally older. So I feel like I can kind of feel that for Finn, where it's like, oh, do you look down on me because I'm younger? Where it's like, yeah, he may not have as much life experience as them, but he can still understand. Like, he just wanted them to have a good time. And then another thing that actually kind of reminded me, like, the whole idea of Finn trying to find love. Like, Finn being so obsessed with Princess Bubblegum for so long, and he moved on, he's with Flame Princess for a while, and then that didn't work out. And then it's kind of like just here and there, they do stuff. They briefly kind of tried to explore something with Huntress Wizard, and then like you kind of find out this whole time like he still very briefly kind of has feelings for Princess Bubblegum, and I kind of feel that. And I love how they very subtly kind of hint at that. Like, yeah, obviously they didn't end up together, but in the finale, whenever like Princess Bubblegum came to say thank you, like she kind of just looks at him and she's like, you're getting tall. Where it's like just the kind of deeper meaning of that. I always like to think of it as like, oh, she's really kind of acknowledging that Finn's getting older. Like, she's acknowledging that he's really getting mature, because she's basically been the same the whole time, but she's really watched Finn grow up, where it's like, wow, he went from just being this little kid to actually becoming this very mature and heroic person that I can really respect. And I just really like that. That just felt like such a good ending for that sort of relationship between the two of them. And then I also love how with LSP, I know I mentioned the whole idea of the element stuff for her, but I like that how before it's like it seems like she doesn't really do anything special. She's just there kind of being herself. But then like she's the one who saves everyone by being herself. It's like Princess Bubblegum, Slime Princess, Flame Princess, and Patience. Like they were all in their elemental ways. Like there was nothing that anyone could do to stop them. And then it turns out that LSP was basically the perfect catalyst to stop them. And it's like she literally got to save all of Oo by being herself. Like she got to be super outgoing, she got to be sassy, she got to be bossy, and she saved everyone. And that was just such a satisfying moment, honestly, to see LSP kind of have that moment of really getting to be a hero. I really like the fact that they gave her that special significance. Is there really much I could say I dislike about Adventure Time? I honestly don't know. There's not really that much I can think of for why I would dislike Adventure Time. I'm not trying to say it's like the perfect show, but I don't think there's that much I could dislike. I could say maybe sometimes they kind of had characters, like they kind of had episodes that were based on characters that weren't really as relevant. So I guess maybe you could say that felt like it kind of slowed it down some. But I guess you could try to spin that a positive way of they try to have a very extensive cast where it's not just Finn and Jake for like 95% of the episodes. Like they tried to give it variety. And I guess another thing is that I talked about Finn's whole romantic relationships. I guess it would have been kind of nice maybe if, at least for me, I'm not saying like, oh, they dead ass should have done this, but I think personally for me, maybe I would have liked it if they did something where in the end Finn actually did get a girlfriend where like you know you kind of just have that classic trope of, oh yeah, the heroic guy gets the girl. I know that sometimes people may not like to see that nowadays, but I feel like for a show like Adventure Time, the way like it kind of has the whole idea of being an adventure like that, I feel like that would have fit in so well, especially for someone like Finn who had so many tragedies in that area. Like even if it's not Princess Bubblegum or Flame Princess, at least maybe have done something, or at least kind of hinted at the idea that something could happen, perhaps. I'm trying to think. I feel like there was something else, like something that wasn't quite settled. Let's see. I guess one thing, like I'm not trying to turn this into a review of the finale or how it ended, but I guess I feel kind of bad that Betty didn't end up with Ice King, where it's like, oh yeah, she finally got, well, Simon. She didn't, like, she finally got Simon back, but at the cost of her own life. Like, not as if she died, but basically her own way of life. But I feel like that's kind of the idea of, I feel like in a way, you could also look at that as not everything works out for everyone. Like, Betty merged herself with Golb so that she could save Simon. So it's like, okay, things didn't work out for Betty, but she did get what she wanted. She got Simon back. And then how Fern died. So it's like, oh yeah, things didn't work out for Fern, but he always did have his redemption. He became a good person again. Yeah, like I I don't know. I feel like anything I can say that I might dislike, I feel like I could spin it in a more positive way where it's like I might not be a fan, but I could understand it. Shoot, like who else was there to honestly though, there were some like I'm not trying to be a hater on this, but there were some moments where I felt like I just didn't really like Flame Princess as much. I don't know, I just didn't really buy into it as much sometimes. I think that they kind of tried to continue to make her a bit too relevant without having her get back together with Finn. Because it's like basically halfway through the amount of time that we knew Flame Princess, that's when she kind of broke things off with Finn. And I feel kind of bad because I feel like he really wanted to get back together with her. I feel like he really had kind of changed. So I'm glad that they always kind of did become friends again, but I don't know. I feel like that's one thing where it's like you never really saw that build up, because I felt like whenever he first started dating Flame Princess, I'm like, oh yeah, I feel so good. Like I can see this really working. But then it's like they just kind of broke it off, and I feel like after that, Flame Princess's character just wasn't really the same. Who else was there? There was I had like another character, sort of like the very back of my mind, but I couldn't remember shit. I guess one thing I just remembered that I did like was the whole. It's not a trilogy, chronology, let's say, of Lemongrab and His Kingdom. How like you see Lemongrab, like he gets his kingdom built, and then you see he has his twin created, and they basically kind of form up their own society, and you see that it just kind of starts to go poorly. And then eventually you see that even though the two Lemongrabs are exactly the same, that even they kind of start to turn on each other. Like even they, like Lemongrab is that crazy that even he starts to turn on himself, and the original Lemongrab starts to kind of overpower the second one. Like you see, the second one actually kind of becomes a bit more caring and considerate, but the first one literally just becomes like a communist, tyrannical dictator. Because then you see Princess Bubblegum saves Lemon Hope because she's like, this child is very gifted and this needs to flourish. Like he should come to the Candy Kingdom. And then you see the original Lemon Grab trying to stop that from happening, but then you see the second one saying like, no, Lemon Grab, or not Lemon Grab, Lemon Hope, go, like go to the Candy Kingdom and then come back and save us all. And then the whole idea of Lemon Hope, the episode, how he's like, no, I don't want to do this, like I don't want to do what everyone's telling me to do, I just want to live my own life. But then eventually he's thinking, you know what, I'm just not going to be able to move on from this. Like I just want to be able to move on and get this out of my head. So he goes in and saves everyone. And then, like I said, you literally just see Lemongrab look like he's straight out of 1984. Like he's making all these videos to try to brainwash the people. Be like, oh yeah, everything's great here. Like no one's suffering at all. But yeah, don't come here, Lemon Hope. And then you see like that final battle against Lemon Hope or Lemongrab. I need to stop messing this up. And then eventually he just kind of moves on. He's like, you know what? I'm just gonna wander around. And then I guess one more thing to talk about the finale. I just love that final sequence whenever they're playing sort of the extended version of the opening theme and they kind of show what it's like for everyone. Like even the minor characters. Like you see Lemongrass. I did it again. You see Lemon Hope out exploring, and then you see he crosses paths with Susan and Frida. And then like you see just all the other people kind of having sort of their happy endings, and it just felt really good. Like there's this shot where you see BMO and he's finally fulfilling Mo's wish, where launches his he launches that part of Mo up into space because that's where he wanted to be. So it's like BMO finally fulfills that wish for his father. And then like Finn and Jake, you see things go well for them. Like you see that one final shot of the humans finally coming to Ooze. So it's like Finn's reunited with his mom. Like, yo, I actually just got goosebumps thinking of that scene right now because it's so good. I actually really just love that moment. Like Adventure Time really just has so many good feel good moments. And it's just one of those shows where, you know, if I'm not doing anything, I feel like I really just want to kill some time. I'm like, you know what? I'm just going to sit back, relax, and watch maybe a few episodes of Adventure Time because it's just so good. I just really, really enjoy it. And like I said at the start of the video, I really like the idea how it came on back when I was a kid, and I just never grew out of it. Like, it didn't end while I was still a kid, and as I started to go through my teenage years, I didn't grow out of it. It's like, no, I consistently watched Adventure Time, and I always enjoyed it, and I made very sure to watch the finale, and I was so sad when it ended. Like, I actually kind of wanted to cry. Like, the only reason I held back was because, you know, I was in a college dorm. I'm like, okay, I don't want to like make a big scene about that. I had a room to myself, but open door policy, yeah. But yeah, I just really love the show. I feel like it definitely evolved very well. I'd say it just kind of sucks that Cartoon Network kind of didn't treat it as well. But you know, gotta give all the love and appreciation to Teen Titans Go. Yeah, derp derp derp. But oh well, I think Adventure Time definitely ended very well. Like and I don't mean this in a hateful way, I think they should have just ended it sooner. Like, I feel like it was kind of dragged out, but I don't blame, like, the producers for that. I really do blame Cartoon Network. I feel like it could have ended, like, 2 years before it did. That's because they just had so many hiatuses that just really kind of killed it. To the point where by the time it ended, it just felt like not as many people were watching, which is real shame. But yes, very great show. I definitely love Adventure Time. I even have this one picture on my phone where it's like pictures from the finales of both Adventure Time and regular show, and it says thanks for the memories. I think I just found it some random place on Instagram, and I'm like, yo, this really means a lot to me because regular show was right there with Adventure Time for me. So it's like, wow, those were basically like the last two cartoons that I really watched that were more aimed for kids, but that kind of grew up with me. Like pretty much any other show that I watched that was a cartoon more aimed for kids, it's like it ended while I was still a kid, or I kind of grew out of it while it was still going on. But no, like Adventure Time and regular show, they started when I was a kid, and I finished them as an adult, and it definitely meant a lot to me. So yeah, I feel like I've really kind of talked about all I really can for Adventure Time. I guess I wanted to talk more about things that I dislike, but honestly, I just can't really think of them. I feel like at that point, I would have to go out of my way to be negative, and I just don't really want to do that for a show that I really happen to like. So, thank you so much for checking out the video. I hope you enjoyed. I wanted to do something a bit different here. That way, I'm not just sitting still playing Pokemon all the time. I wanted to try to do a little bit of variety, and I just know that I really like talking about cartoons, and it just feels very nice to sit down and talk about all the things I like. So if you enjoyed it, then, hit that like button, subscribe so you can see more videos. And I'm just going to do this up until I go back to school because obviously I won't have time for anything after school, so I just wanted to fill up a little bit more time. So I hope you enjoyed and see you in the next one. Bye.